I'm Chef Andres, and today we're going to show you how to make a flan. So Customshop, we're a neighborhood restaurant. We're open 5 days a week currently, and we aim to be the place that someone can come after work for a snack and a drink, and we also aim to be the place that you can come and celebrate your special occasion, your anniversaries, your birthday. But we really try to define what a neighborhood restaurant is. We're the kind of restaurant where you can come multiple times a week, or you can celebrate something special here. But we keep it simple. We source locally, and we source ethically, and we try to not do a whole lot to what we get. We just try to get the best products and keep it simple and feed our community, and that's really what we strive to do on a daily basis. Flan is a dessert that I learned to make from my mother. It's an adaptation of her recipe, and I know flan and custards and stuff like that can be very intimidating at times for people to make at home, but this is something my mom's been making in her kitchen at home for years, and really all you need is a blender, a stovetop, a couple pots, some simple ingredients that you can get at any store, and then all you need is a little bit of time and patience, and that's it. And yeah, it is an overnight process for it to come out ideal. It can be rushed, but it's preferable that it's overnight, but with proper time, patience, and preparation, there's no reason why you can't make this. I'm gonna start by getting everything ready for the caramel. So what we have in here is essentially about half a cup of water and a pint of sugar. Now, the amounts that I'm making will probably make about 12 of these small size cups of flan. So the sugar, once you add the sugar to the water, you don't want to agitate it. If you agitate sugar, it will crystallize when you're making the caramel, and you get these like shards of rocks. We're gonna walk over here and get this going. Now, you want your sugar and your caramel to be essentially on high. You don't want it on low, and it's gonna bubble. Don't be intimidated by the bubbles. It gets very hot, but what you're looking for is essentially a deep amber color, and we'll come back to this. This takes a minute, but we'll come back to it once it starts to get hot. Here we have a mixture of sweetened condensed milk, evaporated milk, heavy cream, and a little bit of salt. Yes, I said salt, and I know we're talking about dessert, but the salt is essential in cleansing the palate when you're having something that has so much fat and sugar in it. So you want to make sure that a lot of your desserts have at least a pinch of salt. So we're gonna make sure that we get all of that stuff out of the container here. And again, this is just evaporated milk, sweetened condensed milk, and a little bit of heavy cream and salt. We're gonna give this a little mix just so that it's nicely incorporated, and then we're gonna lightly warm this up on the stove next to our caramel. So the biggest mistake that someone will make when making flan is, well, there's really two. Let's say three. So they crystallize their sugar for their caramel and it turns into shards, or they overcook the eggs, or they, instead of tempering the eggs slowly, they add in the warm milks too fast and it scrambles the eggs. Other than that, it would be just over or under baking, which is pretty simple. So we're gonna take this little creamy mixture over here next to our caramel, and you can see that our caramel is starting to bubble here. And you're gonna be tempted to wanna move it, but don't move it. Just let it do its thing. So we're gonna get these milks to warm up. And once they warm up, we're gonna add them to our eggs. So while this stuff gets happy, we're gonna walk over here. So over here we have a mixture of whole eggs and egg yolks that we're gonna add into our blender. That over here. And then we're adding to this mascarpone, which is very similar to cream cheese. It has a higher fat content, which is one of the reasons why our flan tends to be so decadent. So we've allowed the mascarpone, and this is a little tip and trick, I guess, that helps. You want to let your mascarpone get to like room temperature. It's just easier to work with in that state. And it'll also be easier when you mix everything. So we're gonna cover that, and then while that stuff heats up, we're just gonna combine these things on low speed real quick. And just kind of make a little that's that. We're gonna let that sit. Now the idea there is that you want it to be a homogenized mixture, so when we slowly add our warm milks to this, everything gets happy and incorporated and together at the same time instead of it being all separated. So that's that. Now we wait until this stuff's ready. You can see how it's starting to bubble on the edges. Now, anything that has heavy fat content like heavy cream or milk has a tendency to boil over. So you want to watch it once it gets to this bubbly state. Because it will start to bubble up from the bottom and it'll boil over and it's going to make a huge mess on your stove, and nobody wants that. But once you see the bubbles forming here and you see the steam coming off of the edges like that, you're essentially ready to be able to mix that with your eggs. And on low speed, really like medium to low speed, we're going to slowly pour in our warm milks. And what you're doing here is tempering the eggs. And tempering is essentially a fancy term for slowly incorporating something hot to the eggs without scrambling the eggs. Because if we were to dump all this hot liquid directly into the egg mixture, it would just turn into a really weird looking omelet, which is gross. And all we're trying to do here is slowly pour that in and incorporate it. We're almost there. And once I pour the whole mixture in, I'll turn it up a little bit higher just to make sure that it's nicely incorporated. But this color is where you want it to be. Now, when your caramel's at this stage, you want to pull it off the heat. You can leave it in that same pot, and we're going to ladle a little bit of this caramel into our containers for the base. So here we have our caramel that is nice and amber. And it's a dark brown color. Don't be intimidated by the smell or the color. This is really what you're looking for here. So we're gonna take a ladle. You gotta be really careful when working with the caramel. It is insanely hot sugar. And we're gonna pour a little bit of caramel into the bottom of the ramekins. So, and I don't know if you can see that amount. Don't touch the bottom of the ramekin. Pro tip, it's very hot. So just enough to coat the very bottom of this. Now, this is something that you can set in advance because the caramel can sit for a couple days. It doesn't have to be done same day. Pour a little bit more caramel into that one. And then a little bit more caramel. Again, the amount of caramel I made here will probably make about 12 of these. But it gets hairy when you make a little less caramel than you need. So you can see how the bottom of these is nicely coated. And we're now gonna let that cool down at room temperature, and it's gonna harden. Now, throughout the cooking process, it's gonna seep into the eggs and it's gonna form that nice like caramel coat that you'll see when we plate. We are going to take our mixture. What I have here is just a container to catch the liquid, and I have a strainer just in case. I'm gonna strain out this mixture to make sure that if there's any little pieces of egg that's cooked out, we obviously pick that out to maintain the smooth texture of the flan. My mom would be proud. I didn't really watch her make it the first time. I ate it several times, and then I wanted to understand the process and all of it. Something that always fascinated me was the caramel aspect, how you could like make something that had caramel on the bottom and still manage to get caramel out. I never really truly understood that, and it was very confusing to me. Now obviously I get it, and after having made it, you understand it. And again, it's just, you know, this is something that it can be intimidating, but once you make it, you realize that it's really not that challenging or difficult to make. So this mixture, you can cook it the same day. You would want to refrigerate it because again, we want our caramel. You can see now, even this, and this has been maybe like, we maybe walked away from this for like 5 minutes. The caramel's already gotten stiff on the bottom, so that's not gonna go anywhere. Now, this mixture is something that ideally, to allow the flavors to develop and allow it to settle, you would make the day before and then you would refrigerate it overnight. And day of that you wanna make your flans, you would set up your caramels and then you would pour the overnight mixture in. So I have some mixture that we made yesterday that I've refrigerated. And you can see the difference here. So just as like, I guess like a little pro tip, this is the mixture that we made today, and you can see how it's a little bit like subtly to the eye. It looks almost whiter, creamier, and that's just because this is all aerated from the blender. So it's got a little bit of air incorporated into it. Once it sets, it looks a little bit more deep. It's also just like much more viscous than this mixture. So now for this mixture, we're just gonna pour over our caramel a little bit. You wanna pour, it's gonna expand slightly when it bakes, so you wanna pour to just under that little lip right there. Again, you want these to, if you make the, sorry, this is actually extremely important. So if you make it like this, you let it set overnight, you don't have to spray these with any pan spray. There's enough fat in them that they're gonna detach. And after baking and after they've set from baking, that caramel is gonna melt and it's gonna act, and you'll see when we plate one, it's gonna act as an agent to help get it out of the container, because you're probably wondering like, how am I gonna get that out of the container without it looking terrible? But the weight on itself and then the caramel loosening throughout the baking process on the bottom allows the flan to like gently be pushed out of it. And I'll also walk you through some tips if it is a little bit stuck, how you can loosen it. That's not very difficult. Now, something that a very good friend of mine taught me, not my mom, she didn't give me this pro tip, this is another friend of mine. When you go to bake these in the oven, you're gonna cook them, you're basically cooking them in bain-marie style, which is essentially you're pouring warm liquid into this container, and then you're putting this with warm liquid into the oven. Now, the reason for that is whenever you're baking a custard, the water allows the heat to be distributed evenly, and you want it to, it's gonna force it to cook evenly, versus if we were to just put this into the oven dry, it would probably cook unevenly and you wouldn't have that final texture that you want. So we're gonna pour some hot water into here, and then we'll get these guys in the oven. And then, you know, because of TV magic, I have a flan that's ready to go, so. Now you don't need an insane amount of hot water. You really just want enough hot water on the bottom of the pan so that the water maybe comes up by like a 1/4 inch up the tins. You wanna pour slowly the hot water because you don't wanna accidentally pour water into your flans, because that would be a disaster. It comes up about, you know, what would be a 1/4 inch or so. And then we have our oven preheated already to 300 degrees. And these are gonna bake for 2 hours approximately. We're gonna bake them for an hour. And then we're gonna rotate them and bake them for another hour. So this is them going into the oven. So equipment-wise, you need a blender, you would need a strainer, and then you would need 2 pots, a pot for caramel and a pot for warming up your milks and cream. Some sort of baking dish, so like a small little hotel pan or any baking dish. And then ideally, those 4-ounce little aluminum souffle cups that you saw me put the mixtures into, those are the best. They store well in that, and it's also like a nice little individual portion. You can make everything that I made in a larger container if you wanted, or like a cake pan, but you know, here we obviously serve individual portions of desserts, and those, they just look cute. They're also easy to get the flan out of. So, you know, I decided to put flan on our menu. It's something I grew up eating. I'm originally from Miami. Flan is everywhere in Miami. At any little bakery that you go to, they serve flan, and it's something that my mom made my entire life. You know, I'm Spanish by heritage. It's a very popular dessert in Spain. So it's something that is near and dear to me, and at the same time is decadent, delicious, and in my opinion, one of the perfect desserts, because you get everything you want in a dessert, right? So it's rich, it's tasty, but it's also not very large and overbearing. So it's a nice little sweet finish to any meal. So something that I just grew up loving, and ultimately, like, the flan base itself yields a perfect canvas for anything you really want to garnish it with. You can top it off with all sorts of things to make it a little bit more fun, and you know, it's just something that I love and grew up eating. So I'm gonna flip this guy. You ready? So this is one that we cooked yesterday and it has cooled overnight, and that caramel throughout the cooking process dissipates. So you can see how it's like lightly moving like that. That's because it was cooked nicely, we didn't rush it, the temperature was correct, everything was good throughout the process. So what I'm gonna do to plate this, guy, is that I'm gonna flip the plate over like this, and then I'm just gonna give that a little rotation. And then just by giving it a light jiggle, it should loosen. You can see how the caramel is starting to seep out the sides. Now, when I lift it, I can feel that it's still a little stuck. So this is where you get a pro tip. So if you take a little knife and poke a small little hole, and I don't know if you saw that, but you can see where it like dislodged itself. And obviously now you can see the caramel dissipating out. And I haven't caused any blemishes to the actual flan, and you'll see that when I lift this up. It just allowing a little bit of oxygen to come in there allowed it to finally loosen itself up. So, and there you have it. So, and this is our flan, and that's pretty much it. And here at Custom Shop, we garnish it with different things seasonally. Right now, we're currently garnishing it with some bourbon and maple figs. We get black mission figs, and we just pour a little bit of bourbon and maple syrup over them and let them get soft. And that's what we're garnishing it right now, because it's, you know, end of winter, we're getting into spring, and we'll start to get some nice local fruits that we can garnish this with. So yeah, we plate in this nice little grandma style flowery bowl. One of the things that made me want to put it on the menu here is just that there's not really a lot of places in Charlotte, North Carolina where you can get, like, you know, flan made like home for me, which was Miami for such a long time, and now Charlotte's my home. So to be able to bring a piece of my home to this city and, you know, elevate it to a certain extent and refine it a little bit to put it on the menu at my restaurant is just, you know, a dream come true for me. So, you know, and ultimately this is, you know, Carmen Kaifer, who's my mother. This is her recipe, so we're now serving Carmen's flan at Custom Shop.